Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a structure so vast it seems to swallow the sun. Imagine a cathedral made of nothing but shimmering glass and skeletal iron, spanning 900,000 square feet, materializing in the very heart of London during the year 1851. This was the Crystal Palace. It was a structure of impossible geometry, a transparent mountain housing technologies that defied the understanding of the Victorian era. And then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Systematically dismantled, moved, and eventually erased from the physical record the very moment its mysterious purpose was served. It was the opening act of a global inheritance protocol. It was a coordinated, surgical effort to strip and destroy the remaining infrastructure of a civilization we are no longer allowed to remember. The official story we are fed in history class regarding the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, the famous White City, is a logistical lie that defies every known law of engineering and economics. We are told that in less than 2 years, a nation still bleeding from the wounds of a brutal civil war constructed over 200 massive, ornate buildings across 600 acres of desolate swamp. These were not shacks. These were structures featuring massive, soaring domes, intricate stone carvings that would take decades to finish today, and electrical systems that surpassed anything seen in the decades that followed. The history books claim these were temporary shells made of a mixture of hemp and plaster. Yet, when you look at the high-resolution archival photos, you see a disturbing contradiction that chills the blood. Beneath the supposed plaster facades, you can clearly see deep foundation stone masonry and massive iron frameworks designed to last for centuries. Look closely at the shadows in those faded sepia-tone photographs. You will see atmospheric energy collectors. Strange, needle-like spires atop the domes that the history books dismiss as mere decoration or flagpoles. There is a profound, echoing silence regarding how these massive complexes were truly powered. In 1893, the world was supposedly just discovering the flickering light bulb, yet the White City was bathed in a glow so intense, so pure, that it could be seen for 20 miles. It was a sea of light in a world of darkness. The year 1816 is recorded in our dusty ledgers as the year without a summer. But when you look at the atmospheric data and the sudden synchronized collapse of agricultural yields across every continent, it looks less like a natural disaster and more like a systemic failure of a global energy grid. The World's Fairs were not celebrations of human progress. They were demolition festivals. They were a way for the new owners of our world to occupy, strip, and then destroy the evidence of a previous, superior global empire. This erasure is buried right beneath your feet, every single day. Walk through the older districts of New York, London, or the frozen street. You will see grand, arched windows, built with the same regal precision as the rest of the structure, but they are half buried in the soil. The official explanation is that the streets were raised to accommodate sewage systems. Think about the sheer, insulting absurdity of that claim. Why would 19th century architects, working with horse-drawn carriages and hand shovels, spend the extra capital, the extra stone, and the grueling labor to build intricate, decorative windows 3 to 6 feet below the ground level? It makes no sense. The soil surrounding these buildings is not the result of slow, natural sedimentation over thousands of years. It is a uniform, suffocating layer of silt and clay that washed over the world in a single, catastrophic event that history has tried to delete. This was the mud flood. This was a global reset that left the grand cities of the old world partially submerged in a sea of earth. The people, we are told, built these cities were actually the ones who simply found them. They dug out the upper floors, renamed the buildings, and claimed the glory of a lost age. They were not the architects. They were the squatters of a fallen empire, wandering through halls built for giants. This is why there is such a glaring, haunting lack of transitional periods in our records. We go from primitive wooden shacks and mud huts to massive stone cathedrals with no evolution in between. To maintain this grand illusion, the new masters of the narrative had to ensure that no records remained of what came before. This was the era of the Great Sanitization. Between 1850 and 1900, nearly every major city in the Western world suffered a catastrophic, citywide fire. Chicago burned in 1871, Boston in 1872. London, San Francisco, Tokyo, Seattle. The list is endless and statistically impossible. These fires did not just destroy homes and businesses. They targeted the city archives, the land deeds, and the genealogical records. When the smoke finally cleared and the scent of burnt history faded, newly formed historical societies stepped in to rewrite the story from scratch. They replaced the free energy technologies of the old world with the dirty, metered, and expensive systems of coal and oil. The transition to cold, soul-crushing brutalism in our architecture was not an aesthetic choice. It was a calculated psychological move to induce collective amnesia. They wanted the world to look ugly so we would stop looking at it. Perhaps the most chilling piece of this puzzle is the biological anomaly of the architecture itself. Stand before the doors of a pre-reset building and ask yourself a simple question. Why are the handles at your chest height? Why are the ceilings 30 feet tall? Why are the steps so steep and the hallways so wide? The scale of the old world was not designed for us. When you look at old photographs of the mid-19th century, the streets, the few people who are present look out of place, like children wearing their parents' oversized clothes. This was the era of the foundling trains. Between 1854 and 1929, an estimated 250,000 orphan children were shipped from crowded coastal cities to the empty lands of the West. Where did these children come from? Why was there such a sudden and massive influx of orphans across the entire globe at the exact same time? These children were the blank slates. They were the survivors of the reset, stripped of their heritage, their parents, and their names, then moved into the empty shells of the old cities. They were taught a new language, a manufactured history, and they were the replacements for a civilization that had been wiped clean. The infrastructure they inherited was far more than stone and mortar. Consider the star forts. These massive, geometrically perfect structures are found on every single continent, from the heart of Europe to the coasts of Africa and the Americas. The history books call them defensive fortifications, but their design is nonsensical for warfare. They are shaped like complex fractals, aligning perfectly with magnetic ley lines. They were not built to keep people out with cannons. They were built to draw energy in. These were geomagnetic resonators, part of a global grid that utilized the Earth's natural frequency to provide wireless power to every home and street. The Great Erasing did not just remove the names of the cities, it removed the very understanding of how the world worked. We call it Antiquitech today. It is the forgotten science of using mercury, gold, and quartz to harvest atmospheric electricity. The spires on the old cathedrals were not for bells, they were antennas. The stained glass windows were not just art, they were frequency filters. When the reset occurred, the new controllers stripped the mercury from the domes, melted the resonators, and told us the spires were for reaching toward a silent god. They turned the power plants into churches and the energy hubs into museums, hiding the truth in plain sight. This brings us to the cartographic void. Examine maps from the 16th and 17th centuries, and you will see a massive empire dominating the northern hemisphere. It was called Grand Tartaria. It had its own flag, its own unique language, and its own territory stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean. It was a global superpower. Yet by the mid-19th, in its place, we find labels like Siberia or the Great Unknown. This was not a slow decline of a nation. It was a linguistic and cartographic murder. The grand cities were renamed. Their history was folded into the narratives of the Russian or British empires, and any mention of the original civilization was scrubbed with industrial precision. They made us believe the Wild West was a virgin wilderness, when in reality, it was a landscape littered with the ruins of a highly advanced civilization decimated only a few decades prior. The transition was seamless because the people who remembered were gone, and the survivors were too busy staying alive to ask questions. The education systems implemented in the 1840s were standardized across the globe for a very specific reason. They were designed to overwrite the living memory of the survivors. This was the 0 hour. It was the moment where the chain of human memory was broken and replaced with a manufactured timeline. We are currently living through the inheritance protocol. We are a reset civilization, dwelling in the hand-me-down ruins of a global empire we no longer understand. Every time you walk past a massive stone building with a buried first floor, you are seeing a glitch in the simulation. The evidence is everywhere, hidden behind the thin veneer of temporary architecture and accidental fires. The power that could effectively remove the collective memory of billions is still in operation today. They want us to believe that our history is a settled matter, a closed book. But the stones remember. The geometry of our cities remembers. The very soil beneath our feet holds the silt of a world that was far more magnificent than the one we are not the first to inhabit this earth. And if we do not wake up to the reality of our own displacement, we will not be the last to be erased. The cycle of the reset is not a relic of the past, it is a recurring mechanism of control. Our memory is the only thing preventing the next wave of erasure. The question is, how much longer until we become one of them? The truth is not hidden in the stars. It is hidden in the foundations of the buildings you pass every single day on your way to work. It is hidden in the eyes of the orphans who were told they had no past. When you begin to see the world not as it is described in your textbooks, but as it truly appears to your own eyes, the illusion begins to crumble. The Great Erasing was a masterpiece of deception, but it was not perfect. There are always remnants. There are always echoes. They are screaming. They are telling us about the giants who walked the halls of the old world. They are telling us about the light that did not need wires or meters. They are telling us about a time when humanity was not a slave to the grid, but a master of the elements. Listen to the echoes in the grand halls of the old train stations. Look at the impossible geometry. The history you were taught is a cage, but the truth is a key. And once you turn that key, the doors to the old world will swing wide, and we will finally see what was taken from us. The Great Erasing tried to bury the future, but it is already beginning to sprout through the cracks in the pavement. We are the survivors, we are the witnesses, and we are the ones who will bring the old world back into the light. The air in those old buildings feels different, doesn't it? It feels heavy, charged with a static that shouldn't exist. When you stand in the center of a star fort, there is a hum in your bones that no historian can explain away. You feel it when you look at the Great Pyramids or the It is the feeling of a technology so advanced it looks like magic to our stunted modern minds. We were told we are at the pinnacle of human achievement, yet we cannot replicate the precision of the stones laid down 500 years ago. We are told we are the masters of energy, yet we pay for every spark while the ancients pulled it from the very air they breathed. They want you to stay distracted, because if you ever truly looked up and saw the atmospheric collectors for what they were, their entire system of control would vanish overnight. If you realized that your ancestors lived in a world of abundance and free energy, you would never accept the scarcity of the modern world again. The mud flood was not just a flood of earth, it was a flood of lies meant to drown our potential. But the water is receding. The dirt is being brushed away. Every time a researcher finds a map of Tartaria, every time a photographer captures the buried windows of a small town, the narrative weakens. We are reclaiming. And when that mirror is whole again, we will see ourselves not as the descendants of primitive peasants, but as the heirs to a golden age. The Great Erasing is over. The Great Remembering has begun. You are part of it now. Every time you question the narrative, every time you look at an old building and see the truth instead of the builders of the old world left us clues. They built in stone because they knew stone would survive the fires. They built in geometry because they knew math is a universal language that cannot be easily faked. They left us a message written in the very skyline of our cities. The message is, the shadow of the reset is long, but it cannot hide the sun forever. The light of the old world is returning, not from the past, but from within us. We are the memory of the earth. We are the heartbeat of the old empire. And we are finally waking up. Think about the sheer scale of the deception. You create a world where questioning the timeline makes you sound insane. But who is truly insane? The person who sees the buried windows and asks why, or the person who looks at a 3-story window underground and says it's for a sewer? Logic is our greatest weapon. Observation is our greatest shield. The structures we call ruins were once the beating heart of a global family. The star forts were the nervous system of a planet that breathed energy. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, and it is time we started looking at the view. The era of forgetting is reaching its end. The truth is rising like the morning sun, and no amount of really look. Notice the height of the doors. Notice the intricate patterns in the ironwork. Notice the way the light hits the old stone at sunset. You aren't just looking at a building. You are looking at a survivor. You're looking at a piece of the puzzle. And as you put those pieces together, the picture becomes clear. We are the children of a lost light, and it is time to turn the power back on. The inheritance is yours. It always was. They just hoped you would never find the deed, but the archives are opening. The soil is giving up its secrets, and the story of humanity is being rewritten by the very people it was meant to. The great remembering is here, and this time, we will not let them take it away. As you walk away from this, don't just listen to my voice. Go outside, find the oldest building in your town. Look at the foundation, look at the windows, touch the stone, feel the resonance of a history that was supposed to be for you are the one they couldn't erase. And now that you know, you can never go back to sleep. The truth is a fire that cannot be quenched, and it is starting to burn in the hearts of millions. The reset failed because you are here. The reset failed because the stones still stand. And the reset will fail again, because we are finally remembering.